Neola had lived on the edge of the small desert town for as long as anyone could remember. Her home was a modest wooden house with a faded blue door, standing quietly against the dry earth and open sky. From her window, she could see the town's main road, the dusty marketplace, and the red mountains rising in the distance. She often sat by that window in the early mornings, watching life begin around her long before she stepped outside. She was an Apache woman in her late 20s, with long dark hair that she braided loosely, allowing the wind to play with the loose strands. Her eyes were soft but sharp, observing everything around her with a kind of calm intelligence. She had a disability in her left leg that caused her to walk slowly and with a slight bend, a result of an accident when she was a child. Though she had learned to live with it, people in town often treated her differently because of it. They weren't unkind, but they were distant, behaving as if they didn't know how to speak to her or how to include her in their lives. Most days, Neola spent her time creating traditional beadwork, weaving patterns that told stories passed down through her ancestors. Her mother had taught her the craft before she passed away, and every bead she threaded felt like a quiet conversation with her mother's memory. These pieces, bracelets, small embroidered bags, and patterned cloth were her way of bringing beauty into a world that often overlooked her. Whenever she went to the marketplace to sell her crafts, she carried a small wooden box filled with her work. The walk from her home to town was slow, but peaceful. The dry air pressed warm against her face, and the earth crunched softly under her footsteps. Children sometimes ran past her, laughing and playing, not out of dislike but simply because they were too young to understand her loneliness. Adults greeted her with polite smiles, yet rarely stopped long enough for a real conversation. Still, she never complained. She kept her shoulders straight and her spirit steady, even when she felt invisible. Her disability wasn't just physical, it affected how people saw her. Some believed she needed constant help, while others assumed she preferred being left alone. None of these ideas came from her. They were decisions made by people who had never asked her who she really was. The truth was, Neola longed for companionship. Not pity, not attention, just someone who genuinely wanted to know her. Someone who would sit with her on the porch, share a cup of tea, and talk about the land, the stars, the past, and the dreams she kept tucked quietly inside her heart. She hoped for friendship, perhaps even love someday, though she never said it aloud. She only kept the hope safe and hidden, like a small flame she protected from strong winds. Every evening, Neola would finish her chores early so she could walk to the edge of town where the land opened into wide plains. She loved standing there, leaning lightly on her walking stick, feeling the world stretch out in all directions. The air smelled of warm sand and sagebrush. Birds circled far above, their shadows drifting across the ground like small moving clouds. Sometimes she imagined herself walking fast and freely across the plains, her disability gone. She pictured herself running with the wind, her hair flying, her feet strong and sure, but she never let these thoughts bring sadness. They were dreams, nothing more, and dreams gave her comfort. In the evenings when she returned from the plains, she often passed groups of neighbors talking outside their homes. They always greeted her with respect, but never invited her to join their conversations. They weren't cruel people. They were simply unsure. Her quiet nature made them think she preferred solitude. Her disability made them assume she struggled more than she actually did. No one took the time to understand the truth behind her calm face. One afternoon, while carrying her beadwork box to the marketplace, she overheard two women talking near the well. They weren't speaking in a hurtful way, but their words still reached her heart. One said, "She's strong, but life must be lonely for her." The other replied, "She's brave, but I don't think anyone knows what to say to her." Neola didn't pause or react, she simply kept walking. But the words stayed with her for the rest of the day. She was used to people deciding who she was without asking. She wished someone would simply sit beside her and let her speak for herself. The marketplace was always busy, children chasing each other between stalls, men unloading supplies from wagons, women carrying baskets of fruits and herbs. Neola set up her small table at the same spot each week, under the shade of a wide tree. Her crafts were arranged neatly, their colors bright against the dusty ground. People admired her work, complimenting the delicate patterns and fine stitching. But the conversations never went deeper than that. A few kind souls bought her items regularly, but even they kept a polite distance. She thanked them warmly, always hoping for a moment of connection, a small opening that could grow into something meaningful. But moments like that were rare. One day, a little girl with braided hair approached her stall. She looked shyly at the bracelets, then at Neola. "These are pretty," she said softly. "Thank you," Neola replied with a smile. The girl hesitated before asking, "Did you make them all by yourself?" "Yes," Neola answered. "I learned when I was your age." The girl's eyes widened. "Really?" Neola nodded and gently picked up a bracelet with blue and white beads. "This pattern is old. My mother taught it to me. Every color means something. Blue for the sky, white for peace." The girl listened with genuine curiosity. For a moment, Neola felt something warm inside a small, simple connection. But the girl's mother soon called her away, and the moment faded. Still, it stayed with Neola long after she packed up her stall and walked home. She loved sharing stories. She loved teaching. She loved being seen, even for a brief moment. If only it could last longer. If only someone would stay. At home, she spent her evenings cleaning beads, preparing new threads, and warming tea over a small stove. She sometimes talked out loud to herself while she worked, not because she was lonely, but because her thoughts grew too full to stay silent. She spoke about her dreams, her mother's stories, and memories of running through the forest trails before her injury. She often wished someone else could hear those words too. The accident that caused her disability had happened during a storm when she was 10. She had slipped on wet rocks near the riverbank. The injury healed, but her leg never returned to its original strength. Over time, she learned to accept it. It was part of her story, not all of it. But the world sometimes treated it as the only chapter. Despite everything, Neola carried herself with grace. She never let bitterness settle in her heart. She believed life had more to offer, even if it arrived slowly. She believed there were still people in the world who could look past appearances and see the soul beneath. She woke each morning with quiet determination. She crafted her beadwork with patience. She walked to town with confidence, even if her steps were uneven. And each night, she looked at the sky filled with stars and whispered a simple hope. Maybe tomorrow will be different. She didn't know that change had already begun. Far away, on that same dusty road she often watched, a stranger was traveling toward town. A man with a calm nature and a thoughtful heart. A man who would soon see her not as others did but as she truly was. But for now, Neola simply sat by her window, watching the world move around her, unaware that her life was about to shift in ways she had never imagined. She didn't know that someone was coming, someone who would notice her strength before anything else, someone who would walk beside her without judgment or hesitation. For the first time in a long time, the wind felt different as it brushed against her window. As if it carried news her heart was not yet ready to hear. And while she sat alone in her quiet home, the world outside was already preparing to change the story she thought would never change. The arrival of the new sheriff happened on a warm morning when the sun was just beginning to rise over the Red Mountains. The town had been without a sheriff for several months, and people had grown used to solving their own small troubles. So, when a tall man riding a calm brown horse appeared on the horizon, the townspeople watched with curious eyes. His name was Eli Turner, a man in his mid-30s with a quiet expression and steady movements. His face carried a softness that made him look thoughtful rather than strict. He wore a simple hat, a long coat dusted from travel, and carried only what he needed, no extra things, no loud attitude. He looked like someone who had walked through many roads, not because he wanted adventure, but because he was searching for something peaceful. When he reached the center of town, he stopped his horse near the well and took a slow breath, as if trying to feel the place. A few people approached, greeting him politely. The mayor, a kind older man, walked up and offered his hand. "You must be Sheriff Turner," the mayor said warmly. "We've been expecting you." Eli nodded gently and shook his hand. "Thank you. It's good to finally be here." There was something calm about his voice. It wasn't loud, but it carried a quiet strength, the kind that made people feel safe without feeling controlled. The townspeople noticed this immediately. Some whispered among themselves, trying to guess what kind of man he was. Others smiled with relief, glad to finally have someone to keep watch over the town. Eli wasn't one to draw attention. After meeting a few people and getting a quick tour of the sheriff's office, he moved in silently, arranging his small number of personal belongings. He placed a worn-out photograph on the desk, something he kept hidden from others, and sat for a moment, staring at it with a heavy heart. Whatever past he carried was not visible to the world, but it stayed with him quietly, like a shadow that followed him wherever he went. He knew he had come to this town not only to work, but also to heal. Life had given him more sorrow than he ever spoke about. He hoped this place, with its slow days and warm skies, would give him a chance to start again. Later that day, he walked through the marketplace to get a sense of the community. The air smelled of fresh bread and sun-warmed earth. Small stalls lined the road, each offering something different: fruits, pottery, fabric, herbs. People moved around busily, yet there was a peaceful rhythm to it all. Eli walked slowly, his hands resting lightly at his sides. Children paused to look at him, women whispered curiously, and men nodded respectfully. He acknowledged each person with a polite nod or a small smile, never rushing, never appearing impatient. And then he saw her. Neola stood under the shade of a tree, arranging her beadwork on a small cloth-covered table. The sunlight filtered through the branches above her, making the beads shine in soft colors. Her posture was calm and careful. Her long dark hair was braided, with a few strands gently brushing her cheeks. She didn't seem to notice the sheriff watching her from a distance. It wasn't her disability that caught his attention, it was her quiet presence. She stood apart from the noise of the market. Yet she wasn't trying to hide. She simply existed with a kind of peaceful strength, like a small flame that didn't need to burn brightly to be seen. Eli found himself pausing. Something in the way she moved, the way she looked at her own work with gentle focus, stirred a sense of familiarity in him, not because he had seen her before, but because he understood the feeling of living quietly on the edges of things. He watched as a few customers walked by, admiring her crafts but not staying long enough for real conversation. She smiled politely, just as she always did, and continued organizing her items. Her smile was genuine, but Eli sensed a loneliness underneath it, one that she had learned to hide gracefully. He took a step toward her stall, then stopped. He didn't want to startle her or appear rude. Instead, he turned slightly and walked a small circle around the market, observing other stalls before approaching hers. He believed in giving people time, space, and respect. When he finally walked toward her table, Neola glanced up. Her eyes held a soft alertness, unsure of what to expect. "Good afternoon," Eli said gently. "Good afternoon," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm Eli Turner," he continued, "the new sheriff." She nodded politely. "Welcome." He looked at the beadwork displayed on her table. "These are beautiful," he said, picking up a blue bracelet gently, as if it were something delicate. "Thank you," she replied. "I make them myself. I can see the care in every piece," he said sincerely. Most customers complimented her beadwork, but few spoke with genuine interest. Neola noticed this difference in Eli's tone. He wasn't speaking out of politeness or habit, he meant every word. "You use traditional patterns?" he asked, still studying the bracelet. "Yes," she said softly. "My mother taught me." Eli set the bracelet down gently. "She must have been a good teacher." Neola's eyes softened. She was. They shared a brief silence, a comfortable one, not awkward. For the first time in a long while, someone was talking to her without pity, without hesitation, and without trying to rush away. Eli didn't ask about her disability. He didn't stare at her walking stick. He didn't shift uncomfortably. He simply saw her. After a moment, he said, "I'll come by again after I settle in. I'd like to learn more about your work." Neola nodded. "You're always welcome." He gave her a small, warm smile before walking away. leaving her with a sense of curiosity she hadn't felt in a long time. She watched him blend back into the marketplace crowd, noticing how people responded to him openly, respectfully, without fear. He was unlike anyone she had met here. In the following days, Eli became a familiar sight in town. He helped settle disagreements calmly, assisted elders with carrying heavy items, and treated everyone with the same quiet fairness. People began to admire him not because he was the sheriff, but because he was a good man. He often passed by Neola's stall during his rounds, sometimes stopping to chat, sometimes simply offering a friendly nod. Each time, she felt a small warmth in her chest, a sign that her days were beginning to feel a little less lonely. One morning, she saw him helping a lost boy find his mother. He knelt to the boy's height, speaking gently, then walked him back with comforting patience. Neola watched from afar and couldn't help smiling. It was rare to see such kindness mixed with such calm discipline. Another afternoon, he delivered fresh water to a widow whose well had run dry. He didn't announce it, didn't wait for praise, and didn't explain himself. He simply did it because it was right. People spoke about these small acts with admiration, slowly building an image of him as a sheriff who brought peace through compassion rather than force. Meanwhile, he continued noticing Neola even when she wasn't aware. He saw the way she greeted elderly couples with soft kindness, the way she taught small children how to thread beads, the way she stood tall despite walking with a slower step. One evening, he watched her from the edge of the square as she closed her stall. The golden sunset cast a warm glow over her as she packed her things with deliberate, careful motions. She appeared tired, but her expression was peaceful, as if she cherished every piece she created. He wanted to approach her, but something in him held back not fear, but respect. He wanted to know her, but he wanted to do it gently, without stepping too quickly into her life. As days passed, Neola also found herself thinking of the sheriff more often than expected. She admired his gentle nature, his quiet confidence, and the way he never treated anyone as less. She sensed that he, too, carried his own private stories he didn't share with the world. She wondered what had brought him here, to this small town, where life moved slowly. The townspeople noticed their short conversations and exchanged curious looks. Some whispered kindly, some neutrally, but no one spoke unkindly, because Eli's reputation for fairness kept negative talk at bay. Still, Neola remained cautious. She wasn't used to someone paying genuine attention to her. She didn't want to mistake kindness for something more. Yet every time Eli spoke to her, her heart felt lighter, almost as if the heavy walls she had built around herself were beginning to shift, just a little. One afternoon, when the marketplace was quiet, Eli approached her stall again. "How has your day been?" he asked. "Good," she said with a soft smile. "Busy, but good," he nodded. "If you ever need help carrying things or moving your table, I'd be glad to assist." "Only if you want, of course." She appreciated that he gave her the choice. Many people simply assumed she needed help. Eli respected her independence. "Thank you," she said. "I'll ask if I do." He smiled gently before leaving, and Neola watched him go with a quiet sense of gratitude. Day by day, something subtle began forming between them. A connection built on small conversations, shared glances, and mutual respect. Neither of them spoke about it, but both felt it growing like a seed, taking root in warm soil. Neither knew where it would lead, but both sensed that life had brought them into each other's paths for a reason. A gentle reason, a hopeful one, a beginning neither had expected. The days slowly warmed as the season changed, and the quiet bond between Neola and Sheriff Eli Turner began to take shape not in loud moments or dramatic gestures, but in small, gentle exchanges that built trust without either of them trying too hard. It started with simple greetings and short conversations. But soon, those moments became a quiet part of both their routines. Every morning, Eli walked through the town to check on things before the marketplace became busy. He carried a notebook in his coat pocket, though he rarely needed it. He remembered most things easily. When he reached the old tree where Neola set up her stall, he always paused for a moment, not wanting to disturb her but not wanting to pass by without acknowledging her either. Sometimes she would already be there, arranging her beadwork on the cloth. Other days, she arrived a little later, taking careful steps with her walking stick. Eli would help set up a chair nearby, not because he assumed she needed it, but because he thought it might make her day easier. And every time, he placed it quietly, then stepped back, giving her space to accept or decline it. Neola noticed everything. She saw how he never stared at her disability, how he judged her by her work and her words, not her walk. She also noticed that he spoke to her with the same tone he used with everyone else, calm, respectful, steady. That alone made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. One morning, as she laid out the last of her bracelets, Eli approached with his usual gentle pace. "You make this place brighter," he said softly, nodding toward the colors of her beadwork. Neola looked up, surprised by the warmth in his voice. "I'm glad if it brings a little color to the day," she replied. "It does," Eli said. "It really does." She could tell he wasn't just saying it out of politeness. His expression always held sincerity, as if he measured every word before speaking. They stood silently for a moment, just watching the small marketplace come to life. A soft breeze carried the smell of warm dust and fresh herbs from one of the stalls. Eli finally said, "Would you mind if I ask about your patterns? I see so many designs, and I feel like each one means something." A small smile tugged at her lips. People often admired her work, but very few asked about the meanings behind it. "Yes, they do," she said, picking up a piece with green and white beads. "For example, this pattern represents hope. The green is for growth. The white is for peace. And the design in the middle?" Eli asked, leaning closer. "That shape tells the story of a journey," she said quietly. "A long road someone must walk with courage." Eli stared at the bracelet for a moment. Something about it seemed to touch him deeply. Then he nodded. "That's a powerful story." It's an old one," she said, "passed down in my family. Thank you for sharing it," he replied gently. Their conversation wasn't long, but it stayed in both of their minds. For Eli, the meanings behind her work gave him a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. For Neola, the interest he showed reminded her that her stories still mattered. Later that day, when the market had quieted, he returned to her stall with a small request. "Do you think you could teach me someday?" he asked. "Teach you beadwork?" she repeated, surprised. He nodded shyly. "If you'd like. I don't want to trouble you. I just think there's a lot of meaning in what you do, and I'd like to understand it better." Her heart warmed. Nobody had ever asked her that before. Most people thought of her crafts as only things to buy, beautiful, but simple. They didn't see the history woven into the patterns. "I can teach you," she said softly. "Whenever you have time." Eli's face brightened with genuine appreciation. "Thank you." That evening, Neola walked home with her box of beadwork, feeling something gentle growing inside her, a mixture of happiness and nervousness. She wasn't used to letting people close. She wasn't used to being noticed for more than her quiet presence. But Eli made her feel like she could speak freely, without judgment or fear. She sat by her window later, watching the sun set behind the mountains, and wondered how someone like him, someone kind yet strong, simple yet deep, had found his way into her life. The next week brought new moments between them. On one warm afternoon, Neola was carrying a heavy basket of supplies from the general store. The weight wasn't impossible, but balancing it while walking slowly required effort. Eli, seeing her from across the street, walked over with gentle steps. "May I carry that for you?" he asked. She hesitated. She didn't want to appear weak. But the kindness in his eyes wasn't the kind that made her feel small. "Yes," she said quietly. "Thank you." He took the basket without making it seem like a heavy task. Instead of rushing, he walked beside her at her pace, matching her slow steps perfectly. He didn't make conversation, unless she did. He just stayed beside her, making the task easier without taking control of it. When they reached her stall, she thanked him again. "I'm always here if you need help," he said, not as a promise she didn't ask for, but as a gentle offer she could accept or ignore any time. A few days later, Neola found herself talking to him more comfortably. She learned small things about him: how he preferred quiet mornings, how he enjoyed reading before bed, how he once lived near a large forest and still missed the sound of trees moving in the wind. He also mentioned he had left behind some painful memories, though he didn't share details. She didn't push. She only listened, giving him the same respect he gave her. One evening, when the marketplace was almost empty, Eli approached her and said, "You don't have to answer this if it makes you uncomfortable, but have you always lived here?" She nodded. "Since I was born." "And your family?" he asked gently. "My family was here too," she said softly. "My parents passed away when I was younger." Eli lowered his gaze in respect. "I'm sorry." "It's all right," she said. "Their memories are still with me. I see them in the land, in the stories they taught me." "They must have been good people," he said. "They were." Her voice carried a warmth that made him smile faintly. He admired how she spoke about her parents with grace rather than sadness. Over time, their conversations grew longer, flowing more easily. Sometimes they talked about the land and the weather. Sometimes they talked about the future. Sometimes they shared small jokes that made them both laugh softly. People in town began noticing the small friendship forming between them. When Eli visited her stall, a few curious glances always followed. Some townspeople whispered among themselves, not negatively, but with a kind of surprised interest. They had never seen Neola talk so much with anyone. They had never seen the sheriff linger anywhere without clear purpose. Children noticed too. One little girl who liked visiting Neola's stall ran up to her one afternoon and whispered loudly, "The sheriff likes your stories." Neola's cheeks warmed. Eli happened to hear the comment as he walked by, and he smiled quietly without saying a word. But not everyone understood the growing connection. A few people wondered if Eli was simply being polite. Others wondered if Neola might be reading too much into small acts of kindness. But Eli ignored the whispers. His decisions had always come from his own heart, not from other people's opinions. One evening, he walked to her stall just as she was closing. "You look tired," he said gently. "It was a long day," she admitted. "Would you like me to walk you home?" he asked softly. "Only if you're comfortable with it." She paused. It had been a long time since anyone had walked with her at her pace, without rushing, without making her feel slow. "Yes," she said, "I would like that." They walked side by side, the sky painted in orange and pink hues. Eli never moved ahead of her. He matched her pace exactly, adjusting without making it noticeable. They talked quietly about the day, the clouds, and the soft wind. When they reached her house, he said goodnight with a gentle smile. She thanked him, and he walked away, his steps steady and slow. Inside her home, she leaned against the door for a moment, her heart beating a little faster than usual. She had not felt this kind of warmth in many years. It scared her, but it also gave her hope. That night, Eli sat in his small room at the sheriff's office, thinking about her. He didn't know exactly when it had happened, but something about her presence felt peaceful to him. He admired her strength, her kindness, and the quiet way she carried herself through life. He felt drawn to her not out of pity, but out of respect and genuine affection. The connection between them was growing, slowly and naturally. No one rushed. No one forced anything. It was just two hearts moving a little closer each day. Neither of them knew what the coming days would bring, but both of them felt something blossoming quietly, like a flower opening under the warm desert sun, soft and beautiful, unnoticed by the world, but deeply meaningful to the two souls standing near it. The bond between Neola and Eli continued to grow quietly, like a small flame protected from the wind. Their conversations became part of their days. Their respectful glances carried meaning, and their presence brought comfort to one another. No one spoke about it openly, but people in town sensed there was a gentle connection forming between them. Life in the small desert town followed its usual rhythm until one late afternoon when something unexpected shook the calm. A strong, dry wind began sweeping through the valley, carrying dust and loose sand with surprising force. At first, people thought it was just a passing gust, but within minutes, The sky turned hazy, and the wind grew more violent. It was the start of a sudden sandstorm, one of the worst the town had seen in years. Stalls in the marketplace rattled, cloth covers flapped wildly, and people hurried to close shutters and gather their belongings. Children were rushed indoors, and merchants began packing their goods quickly. The animals tied near the well grew restless, pulling against their ropes. Eli immediately stepped into action. His calm voice rose just enough to be heard as he guided people toward safety. "Get inside. Stay away from open areas. Secure your windows," he called out. Despite the noise of the wind, people listened to him. He moved swiftly without panic, checking each corner of the marketplace and helping those who struggled. But in the middle of the storm's rising chaos, Eli spotted something that tightened his chest with worry. Neola was still at her stall, trying to pack her beadwork before it got damaged. Her hands moved quickly but carefully, gathering the fragile pieces. The wind made it harder for her to stand, and the dust stung her eyes. Eli didn't waste a second. He ran toward her, shielding his face from the blowing sand. "Neola," he called out, his voice muffled by the wind. "Leave it. We need to get you inside." She turned, blinking through the dust. "I can't let the beads scatter. They'll blow away." "I'll help," he said firmly. "But we have to hurry." Together, they gathered the last of the beadwork. Eli used his coat to cover the box so the wind wouldn't knock it out of her hands. Then he stood beside her, adjusting his pace to hers. "Stay close," he said. "I won't let you fall." With the sand blowing fiercely around them, they moved toward the nearest shelter, the doorway of the general store. The owner, Mr. Harlan, held the door open, waving them in urgently. "Come on, quickly." Eli guided Neola inside, making sure she was steady on her feet. The moment they stepped into the dim but safer interior, the strong howl of the storm echoed outside, reminding them just how dangerous it had become. Inside the store, a few families huddled together, brushing dust from their clothes and comforting frightened children. The air was filled with worry. People whispered about livestock left outside, about doors breaking, about neighbors who hadn't reached shelter yet. Eli gently dusted sand off his coat and then looked at Neola. Her hair was messy from the wind, her cheeks dust-covered, but her expression was calm. She held the box of beadwork against her chest protectively. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern deep in his voice. "Yes," she said with a small nod. "Thank you." "I'm glad you're safe," he replied softly. But the storm wasn't the only challenge that day. As the sandstorm raged, strange noises echoed through the walls, objects falling, animals crying, wood creaking under pressure. Everyone inside the store listened anxiously. After a few minutes, someone rushed inside, covered in sand from head to toe. "The old water tower, something's wrong with it," the man said, coughing. "It's tilting. If it falls, it'll crash into the school." Gasps filled the room. The school was not far from the water tower. If the tower collapsed, it could do terrible damage. Eli didn't hesitate. "Stay here," he told Neola. "I need to go check." She grabbed his arm gently, not to stop him, but out of worry. "It's too dangerous." "I know," he said softly, holding her gaze. "But I can't let the school be destroyed." "I'll be careful." She slowly released his arm, trusting him even though fear tugged at her heart. Eli stepped out into the storm again, moving with effort as the wind pushed against him. The air was thick with dust. He could barely see a few feet ahead, but he made his way toward the water tower, using his memory of the town's layout to guide him. Meanwhile, inside the store, people pressed against the small window, trying to see through the sand-filled air. Neola sat near the door, gripping her walking stick, unable to calm her growing worry. Minutes felt like hours. When Eli finally reached the water tower, he saw that the structure had been weakened. An old wooden support beam had cracked under the pressure of the storm. The tower leaned dangerously toward the schoolyard. If the crack widened any further, it might fall. Eli quickly studied the situation. He couldn't fix the beam alone, but he could slow down the collapse. He found thick ropes tied near the storage shed, by the tower ropes used for hauling large barrels. Fighting the wind, he dragged the rope toward the weakest side of the tower and tied it securely to a sturdy post. It wasn't perfect, but it gave the tower enough support to prevent immediate collapse. Just as he finished securing the rope, two townsmen appeared through the dust, coughing and squinting. "We saw you coming this way," one shouted. Eli nodded gratefully. Together, the three of them reinforced the rope and added another one to increase stability. It was hard work, made even harder by the sand beating against their faces, but they didn't stop until the tower stood firmer. By the time they returned to the store, their clothes were heavy with dust, and their breaths were uneven. When Eli stepped inside, Neola stood up quickly, her heart pounding with relief. She didn't rush to him, but her eyes showed everything she felt. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. He wiped the dust from his face and nodded. "I'm fine. We secured the tower. It should hold until the storm passes." A collective sigh of relief filled the room. The storm lasted for several hours, keeping everyone inside. People shared stories, helped calm scared children, and tried to keep their spirits steady. Neola sat close to Eli, their shoulders almost touching. She didn't speak much, but her presence told him she was grateful and relieved. Eli, too, found comfort in having her near him. Despite the danger outside, something about sitting next to her felt safe. By the time the storm finally weakened, the sky turned a dull gray, and the wind grew softer. When it became safe enough to step outside, people slowly emerged from the store. The town was covered in a heavy layer of sand. Some fences had fallen, a few roofs were damaged, and scattered items lay buried. But everyone was grateful that no one had been seriously hurt. The water tower still stood, thanks to Eli and the two men who helped him. As Eli and Neola walked out together, several townspeople approached. "Sheriff, thank you," one woman said. "You saved the school." "You did good, Turner," another man said, patting him on the shoulder. Eli nodded politely, keeping his humble expression. "We all helped," he said. "No one does anything alone." But people knew he had taken the first risk. He had stepped into the storm before anyone else dared to. Neola stood beside him quietly, watching how the town looked at him with new respect. She felt a deep warmth in her heart, not just because he was brave, but because he was brave without needing praise. As they walked toward her stall, now buried halfway in sand, she looked at him with soft eyes. "You always think of others first," she said gently. He smiled faintly. "It's just part of the job." "No," she replied, shaking her head softly. "It's part of who you are." Her words touched him. He didn't say anything at first. He simply looked at her, feeling a quiet connection that had grown deeper through the day's events. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "I'm glad you're safe, Neola." "And I'm glad you came," she replied, her voice low but full of meaning. They stood there for a long moment, the wind calm now, the storm finally quiet. Around them, people worked together to clean up the mess the sand had left behind. But in that still moment, all Eli and Neola felt was the soft, growing bond between them, stronger now, shaped not only by gentle conversations but by standing together through a difficult day. Neither of them said the words aloud, but something unspoken passed between them: trust, respect, a sense of belonging, a connection that neither had expected but both were grateful for. The storm had shaken the town, but it had also brought two hearts closer than ever.